We think liver and we think what we consume that's bad or what we consume that's good. How do we help our liver? We don't think about these external factors that might even play a larger role than even what we eat. Okay, so if we start looking at the research, we realize when we are stressed or when we are in this fight or flight mode, we actually inflict some pretty serious damage on the liver. Now, I'm not going to make this video that simple. I'm not going to say just don't be stressed out. I'm going to give you some ways that you can potentially combat this negative effect. But first, we have to understand what is actually happening. A study that was published in the journal Scientific Reports. Now, this was not just some small study. This took a look at over 171,000 people. And it took a look at them over the course of a number of years. And they found that people that were more stressed had a higher chance of developing a non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And not just by a small amount, 17% increased risk of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease for the highest stress group. And this was even more pronounced in men. So men might even fall victim to the issues with stress more so than women. But we need to understand the mechanism here. If we understand the mechanism, we can put some things in place to potentially combat it. So first we have to understand, when we go into fight or flight, just the good old stress response, the idea behind fight or flight is to increase cortisol levels to liberate fuel so that we can actually move, run away from a tiger, run away from a saber-toothed tiger, right? That means blood is being diverted to the periphery, going to the muscle, going to the limbs. That means our organs starve a little bit, specifically the liver. Blood does not get to the liver when we are stressed out. So you end up with a degree of hypoxia. Hypoxia means you have a lack of oxygen at the liver level. Now, we have to remember that the liver is a metabolic organ. It has mitochondria in it. It processes energy. And when we are starved of oxygen at the liver, just like when we're starved of oxygen during a workout, our muscles kind of crap out, right? Well, our liver is starving from oxygen. So in that case, what ends up happening is it ends up increasing levels of reactive oxygen species. These are just a fancy name for oxidative stressors. Now, it may sound like something very simple and nonchalant, but oxidative stress is a huge, huge deal. And when our mitochondria are producing and emitting more reactive oxygen species, that in essence is creating more toxicity that the liver has to deal with. And we run into a big problem because now we have more toxicity, but we are also in this chronically stressed state where we're not able to even deal with said toxicity. But I'm going to throw one more curveball in here, because what do people tend to do when they're stressed out? They tend to drink alcohol. And I'm going to mention this briefly because this isn't the point of this video. But alcohol sort of disarms the glutathione, our inherent naturally occurring antioxidant that really deals a lot in the liver. Okay, so when we have to take that glutathione to deal with the toxins coming in from alcohol and we're stressed out, we have A, an increase in reactive oxygen species, and B, a decrease in the ability to deal with it to begin with. You see the pattern here, right? This was published in the journal Brain and Behavior, where we start understanding sort of these mechanisms. This isn't just me pulling things out of the side of my mouth, but it goes beyond just this whole sort of fight or flight thing. We also have to look at cortisol. Cortisol normally will actually decrease inflammation in the periphery. Okay, so when you use like a corticosteroid or something like that, the idea behind that is to lessen cortisol. And that can actually be a good thing when it's a stress response. However, what we're starting to notice is that cortisol might have a backwards effect when it comes down to the liver. So when cortisol spikes as sort of a result of this fight or flight, remember that when you have a spike in cortisol, you can have a reduction in inflammation. It's sort of like if you take a corticosteroid, right? Like if you take hydrocortisone, it kind of lessens that inflammatory response. So it can be a potentially good thing. But cortisol actually has a backwards effect at the liver. It can actually spike an inflammatory response in the liver in an effort to deal with potential damage quickly. The liver is that important that when cortisol is present, we actually increase inflammation to deal with the present problem. This inflammation leads to more reactive oxygen species. Now, I'm going to get into some more nitty-gritty because this is very interesting, but I put a link down below for something you might find interesting. It's called Thrive Market, and the reason that I mentioned Thrive Market is because they have some drinks that are like alcohol alternatives, so things that you can sip on at night, things like that. That might be a wise choice to maybe switch over to, but they also have lower carbohydrate foods and like ketogenic style foods as well, so that you could actually start start opting for something that would produce more ketones. Now, the reason I mentioned that, ketones might have an anti-inflammatory effect, which could possibly combat some of these things we're talking about as a result of stress. So very, very interesting. But even if you're not into that, they're an online membership-based grocery store. I put that link down below because you'll save 30% off your entire grocery order. So 30% off your whole grocery order. Like even if you fill up your cart with $500 worth of stuff, 30% off your entire first grocery order, plus a free gift worth up to $50 when you use that special link down below. They've been a sponsor on this channel for half a decade and they are awesome. So that link is down below, and that is a special discount link just for people that want to do their grocery shopping through Thrive from my channel. We have to remember this other piece, right? This whole inflammation piece is so critical to liver, because when we have pro-inflammatory cytokines that are being secreted at a liver cell level, these pro-inflammatory cytokines are going to increase more of this reactive oxygen species. So then we spin off and we have more inflammation that's occurring. When we have inflammation at the liver level, you are walking a fine line towards necrosis. Now, a necrotic cell is a dead cell. So in this case, when you have necrotic cells, even at a small degree, these necrotic cells secrete what are called damage-associated molecular patterns. Okay, they secrete particles and proteins and chunks of their own DNA because they're dead or dying. And when they do that, it's like they're leaching out all this crud. Well, what happens is the body has to upregulate the immune response to deal with said crud. So it's interesting, we look at, okay, yes, we could be potentially damaging the liver, but even more so, we have this huge inflammatory response that is systemic throughout the entirety of our body as a result of these dead or dying cells secreting an inflammatory response. This specifically at a liver level will trigger what are called Kupffer cells in the liver. These Kupffer cells then secrete what is called interleukin-1 beta. This is an inflammatory cytokine that is notorious for causing issues as far as just systemic inflammation is concerned. The joint pain, the brain fog, IL-1B is a huge, huge component when it comes down to that whole piece of the puzzle. So the dying cells then circumnavigate and ultimately create this inflammation in the liver that spearheads this whole process, starting over and over and over again. Then we couple that with another piece. When we are stressed out and we are living an unhealthy lifestyle and we are sedentary, the problem becomes even worse. There's a study that was published in the BMJ Open Journal. It took a look at over 2,000 participants, and it found that people that are sitting more than 7 hours per day end up having a 9% increased risk of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. There's a couple of equations that are happening here. Okay, when you are stressed and sedentary, and you overeat, which is all easy to do in the same continuum, you are really walking this very, very fine line between healthy liver and totally just damaged liver. When we overeat and we have an inability to deal with nutrients, that's when they store in the liver. That's when we start developing a problem. And when we are overeating and we're stressed and we just cannot deal because our organs are not just, they're hypoxic and they're not in the mood to deal with food, that's when we start having these problems, okay? So some of the things that I recommend people do: steady state, like zone 2 type of cardio. That's like 60-65% of your VO2 max, 60-65% maybe your max heart rate. Just nice and easy where you're doing cardio where you can hold a conversation. What this is going to do is this can actually help allow those lipids that are circulating in the bloodstream to be utilized in the mitochondria of the muscle for fuel, lessening the chance of them actually storing as liver fat, right? Causing a problem there. Reducing your intake of high fructose corn syrup, reducing your intake of fructose in general if you're someone that's consuming more than maybe 50 or 60 grams per day, which isn't hard to do if you're drinking soda, okay? So just trying to reduce that. Reducing the saturated fat intake down to about 20% of your total fat calories. So if you eat 100 grams of fat, 20 grams of fat or less of it being saturated, because that can directly contribute to the liver fat. Now, the biggest piece of this is trying to impact stress, right? Try to reduce our stress as much as we can. One of my favorite ways to reduce stress is sitting in a sauna for 10 or 15 minutes a few days per week. You don't have to make it a huge stressor. Make it relaxing so the body can actually get the endorphins and you get the stress relief response from it. These little things that are metabolic switches that you can kind of mess with can play a big role. And of course, I mean, following some kind of lower carb protocol might have this effect on the inflammation system within the body. But again, I don't want to force you to eat one way or the other. I want to give you pragmatic things that you can utilize. So as always, keep it locked in here on my channel. I'll see you tomorrow.